War. War never changes.
That may be true, Ron, but Fallout does. Now part of the Bethesda juggernaut, the series has become a household name, a franchise that has an online game in Fallout 76, plenty of merchandise adorning shelves around the globe, and even a very well regarded TV series. Many of those who've never played a single second in the various wastelands will know of Fallout. It wasn't always this way. Before Lucian the Gaul, before the Commonwealth and the Capital Wasteland, even before Bethesda, there was the Vault Dweller and his quest for the water chip. The original Fallout shares so many similarities with its contemporaries, but many more differences, making it a difficult task to go back to if you're only familiar with the west coast of 2077 and beyond. This does, however, make it a prime candidate for a retrospective to explore the good, the bad, and the ghoulish of Fallout.
Maybe.
1983, 94 years before the bombs fell. Interplay Productions was founded by developers Brian Fargo, Jay Patel, Troy Worrell and Rebecca Heineman, as their previous employers Boone folded. After years of doing commission work, Interplay Productions had their first big hit with The Bard's Tale published by EA. This success led them from being known for this series and for role-playing games as a genre. The Bard's Tale series showed that the team, led by Fargo, had a knack for making compelling and complex dungeon crawlers that took the tabletop virtues of games like Dungeons & Dragons and meshed them into a dungeon crawler. The series was a competitor to the behemoth of Ultima and Wizardry, being in the same mould but with arguably more depth and nuance than either at the time. However, these games, while great dungeon dwellers, didn't have the same great storytelling capabilities of which we associate RPGs with now, though the technology was catching up with this intent. 1988, 89 years before the bombs fell. In 1988, EA published an Interplay Productions role-playing game called Wasteland. The game was based primarily on a different tabletop role-playing game system, that of Mercenaries, Spies and Private Eyes, with the creators of this system, Ken St. Andre and Michael Stackpole, also being invited onto the design team for Wasteland. The player's party of characters would each have 7 attribute scores that determined their nature and ability in combat. They would gain experience as you traverse through the world using skills and battled enemies. While the setting is very different to A Bard's Tale, the core components seemed very similar, but what is much more interesting to note is that there is a clear attempt to make the journey much more unique. Wasteland was one of the first games able to present a persistent world in which actions made by the character would be registered by the game and remembered. This allowed for the game to feel much more alive and the plot to evolve within the game spaces and even be impacted by the players. Stackpole, the writer for Wasteland, allowed these new systems and ideas to flourish with a unique plot that was discovered slowly throughout the game. The player and their party of desert rangers would explore a post-apocalyptic alternative version of the Southwest United States of America, coming up against the dangers of the wastes and overcoming the existential threat of a pre-war AI and its converted cyborg population. This all sounds very familiar. 1994. 83 years before the bombs fell. In the previous 6 years, Interplay Productions had gone from being a studio that worked primarily on RPG titles and being published by others like Electronic Arts, to becoming a significant force in the gaming industry that published other developers' titles. They would go on to become the North American publisher of Heart of Darkness in 1998, a title that I previously covered in a retrospective. Their portfolio stretched beyond any single genre of the game, though they still kept a handhold on role-playing games, and in 1994 a green light was given to Tim Kaine to form a small team within Interplay to start a new series. Tim Kaine would be the director of the new game, with Chris Taylor and Leonard Boyarsky being the lead designer and art director respectively. The team deliberated on what themes and settings the game should possess and ended up taking huge influence from Wasteland, settling on a post-nuclear apocalyptic landscape as their sandbox. There were originally ideas to pursue rebirthing the Wasteland IP, but EA had it in their grasp and were never likely to let it go, so instead they tentatively named their project Full 13, a GURPS post-nuclear role-playing game. As you can probably imagine, that title wasn't seen as the right fit for their intentions, and apparently Fargo gave his only real input by suggesting the name Fallout. Fargo himself wouldn't really be involved with the Fallout development, but it is worth stating that he and the rest of the Wasteland team certainly left their impact on the project, with Wasteland being dubbed the original Fallout as it is big its impact. However, there are other key influences such as Mad Max 2 and 1950s sci-fi epics, landing on a unique style of retro-futurism that looks nostalgic and futuristic at the same time, with Vault Boy being the epitome of this look. 1996, 81 years before the bombs fell. Fergus Urquhart had come aboard the project. He'd come to Interplay in 92 and quickly climbed up the ladder, and in 96 he was running for the RPG division, and he is credited with keeping the project alive when the game was first cancelled. Interplay had got the rights to D&D and would go on to publish Baldur's Gate and develop other D&D titles, but with such a big license, people were wanted and were taken from other projects, such as Fallout. However, Urquhart instead managed to keep a very small crew together, seeing how committed Kane and the others were to Fallout. Later in the year, he created a new division of Interplay Productions called Black Isle Studio, and they were credited as the developers of Fallout, but the division didn't formally work on the Fallout project, just many working on Fallout came to be part of the division and would work on its sequel. Going back to that placeholder title, we'll still see that Vault 13 is integral to the story of Fallout, but what is a GURP? GURPS stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System, another tabletop role-playing system that Interplay had got the rights to. The appeal of GURPS was that you could tailor the system to any setting or tone you would like. You could play your classic fantasy adventure with it, or you could play a steampunk adventure focused on diplomacy. GURPS allowed you to pull in and out skills and proficiencies that you'd like, becoming as specific as you'd like. The appeal of this is evident from a games developer that could create a GURPS engine and then reproduce new settings of games without starting from scratch. One thing Leonard said to me is, "I can't believe it's always so different." And I said, "It's different because you're all different. You played one session and then you came to the next and just watched." I said, "It's the same rooms with the same GM using the same rules, but because the players are so different, using different abilities and making different decisions, it'll come out entirely different." This idea was one of the main reasons that the production of what would become Fallout happened, as Kane convinced Fargo of the system's potential. 1997, 80 years before the bombs fell. Unfortunately for Tim Kane et al., Steve Jackson, GURPS creator, didn't appreciate Fallout's penchant for gore and subsequently terminated the license to use his system. This was another time Fallout may have seemed to be cancelled, as they needed to make a huge overhaul to the core systems of the game, but Kane and Taylor worked diligently for 2 weeks to design and code a whole new system, the Special System. The graft of a small team united by strong senses of player freedom made Fallout happen. And so, in 1997, Fallout was released. 80 years later, the bombs would fall. There are many iconic intro sequences in gaming. The Last of Us made me drop my controller. Silent Hill has you navigate through a growingly gruesome alleyway. And who could forget?
Hey, you're finally awake.
Just in 1997 alone, you had Final Fantasy VII's grand cinematic masterpiece of an introduction, but none of these games so flawlessly and efficiently convey a complex setting and unique tone as Fallout's opening FMV. It's so good at what it does that Fallout 3, when it was newly acquired by Bethesda, essentially remade it in its entirety. The ink spots maybe plays amongst a regalia of American retrofuturistic propaganda, giving you an idea of the world that was, before panning out to see the remains of a deserted, desolate city, the world that now is. We can even see Vault Boy here, character that is mascot both in-game and out of it. In the game, he represents the Vault Tech company that built dozens of underground shelters in anticipation of nuclear destruction. There are other familiarities that others that will know the series will notice, including the internal words,
War. War never changes.
Ron Perlman just has something about him that drips these words in more foreboding that is possible, and not utilising him in Fallout 4 was an unnecessary own goal. The following monologue concisely sets the scene for the world we are about to inhabit, with us eager to embrace the harrowing challenge. Before we can do so, we have to create our character. You can see the tabletop RPG bedrock of Fallout straight away. While not an issue with the first Fallout, this character creation section is very matter of fact. I much prefer how Fallout 3 embeds this process kind of naturally into the story, and considering that the opening of that game is very much modelled on this first Fallout, it is one place where I believe the improvement is unquestionable. questionable, but this is more of an aside rather than a stick to beat this game with. In actual fact, despite having to navigate through the very technical character creation screens, the way it's presented keeps you still within that bulky 50 computer aesthetic, with the tattered paint and rust to go with it. You can choose one of these 3 set characters, edit these or create your own. Max Stone is a strong brute, being good at labour and not much else. Natalia is a sneaky woman who's much more adept at avoiding enemies, and Albert is a charismatic local leader who's more likely to try and negotiate his way out of trouble. In my main playthrough, I decided to create my own character that was similar to Albert in that he was more about talking than anything else. To modern audiences, this is a very dense bit of information, but to be fair to Fallout, it's fairly straightforward in its layout and maintains that bulky tech charm. On the left, we have our special stats: strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. These govern the overall ability and build of our characters. They act on the whole as you would expect. Higher strength increases your carry weight and health, improves your baseline physical skills such as unarmed, whereas high intelligence makes you better at more technical skills and even gives you more skill points per level. There are also some optional traits or perks that any character can possess that uniquely change the character and make them much more mechanically different. For the main playthrough, I chose Bloody Mess and Good Natured. Bloody Mess is more so I can show some of the animations off, and Good Natured to fit the bill of this build. To what degree each skill, optional skill and special stat is balanced will be discussed throughout this retrospective, but on the whole I feel that this character is somewhat well-rounded as a talk first, shoot second figure. Also, I decided to be a 27-year-old male. Will that be important? No, it won't. I might as well just be an old lady, and that really will make such a negligible impact on the difference in how Fallout 1 will play out. Just a heads up, there will be spoilers. I will be going in depth into the game's plot and choices, and this will likely ruin the fun of exploring the wasteland. So if you're planning to play Fallout, I advise you to just leave this video on, but walk away. Thus you help my numbers, but I'm not ruining your future experiences. I'm playing on the European 1.1 patch. This is the default on GOG where I bought the game. I'll go more into the patch later as it becomes more relevant. Once we've completed our character sheet, we are ready to start the game proper. But we once again are interrupted by a cutscene. This one more directly aimed at our player character.
You're here. Good. We've got a problem. A big one. The controller chip for our water purification system has given up the ghost. Can't make another one, and the process is too complicated for a workaround system. Simply put, we're running out of drinking water. No water, no vault. This is crucial to our survival. And frankly, I think you're the only hope we have. You need to go find us another controller chip. We estimate we have 4 to 5 months before the vault runs out of water. We need that chip. We marked your map with the location of another vault. Not a bad place to start, I think. Look, just be safe, okay?
The Overseer is played by Kenneth Mars, who also voiced King Triton in The Little Mermaid. This little cutscene has our first face model, that of the Vault 13 Overseer, and isn't he a beaut? The animation for the close-up faces of Fallout were made in a fairly unique way that gives it a distinct character that somehow avoids Uncanny Valley. Honestly, I don't think I can think of a title prior to Fallout's release that has more realistic 3D characters than their face models. They look a bit funny by today's standards and certainly Play-Doh-y look, but at the same time, I think they're incredibly realistic. Play-Doh-esque is not a surprise either when you took a look at the process behind the way of making these animations. Each talking head, as they're referred to, was sculpted first in clay before being digitally scanned and animated. This process feels years before its time, something you can imagine studios of modern AAA titles incorporating rather than a side project in the 90s. It really helped achieve a highly detailed, accurate yet distinctive form, and reinforced another theme that is at the core of Fallout that many won't expect, that of realism. The Overseer is incredibly direct and to the point in telling us who we are and what our goal is. We are descendant of the Vault, oblivious to the wider world, and we are searching for a new water chip to keep our friends and family in the Vault alive. Bish, bash, bosh. You only have one lead, that of another vault that was nearby. The vault's door is sealed and we are introduced to Fallout proper. We can see an impeccable blue and yellow jumpsuit silhouetted against the vault door, itself buried amongst a dreary cave. That is obviously our player character, and with this door shut tightly behind us, there is only one way to go. forward. Already the scene that is set is that of foreboding loneliness. As we have no one around, we can see only a skeleton beside us and there's nothing to hear but the creaking ambience and our own thoughts. How imperative it was for the Overseer to give us a clear objective is made obvious as there's nothing else we have in the wasteland. Well, that's not strictly true, as by pressing INV we can access our inventory. We have a knife, a gun, some bullets, some torches and some stimpaks, the post-apocalyptic health potion. Filtering through this inventory is awkward to say the least, as it's essentially a clunky list of images that we can interact with. By simply dragging and dropping we can equip some armor and up to 2 items. We can hover over the items for a description, and this all seems very normal and familiar. Having only 1 slot for armor and 2 item slots is quite little for RPGs, especially at the time, but this isn't bad in of itself. It's just a tad surprising that equipment wasn't as wide-ranging as we expect in Fallout. That doesn't mean that what you use is redundant, far from it, just that you have a fairly small pool of things to choose from and only can select a couple. The only thing that bucks this trend is that we have 2 different types of ammo for the same gun, meaning that ammo choice and availability is somewhat providing the player with loadout choices that can be lacking elsewhere. If we press or hold click, we can also select other options for each item, such as examining it or using it. We can also do the same to interact with the world outside of our backpack, and other options such as talk and use skill may be available. Any examination we make is logged in the bottom left hand corner of our screen. This area is highly important as it logs everything: what you see, attack, results, XP gains, and even story beats. It kind of acts as a dungeon master or games master, telling you what is happening and what damage you do. When I fight these rats, I can see the details of my poor form coming up there. Fighting is turn-based, something that will be obvious to some people and completely wild to those coming straight from the more modern titles. For an RPG, it's quite a streamlined system, but it has some tricks that stop it being too overly repetitive. At the bottom of our screen, we have a big slot where we can see our equipped items will be, such as this 10mm pistol. It's indented into the UI to show it's clickable. There is a line stemming from it leading to a red button. This switches the shown item to the other equipped item. Doing this costs no AP. AP or action points is shown above the item box, shown by green lights. Each turn you will have up to 10 of them, determined by your character's agility. You can use them to perform certain actions. Moving a hex costs a base of 1 AP, for example. Shooting and reloading costs more. We can cycle through our equipped items' abilities by right clicking, and each tells us the action's corresponding cost. This pistol takes 5 AP to shoot, and we can do so by left clicking the button and then selecting the required target, which should be highlighted in red. If, and that's a big if, you do hit your target, you'll be told how much for in that log in the bottom corner. We will go into combat a little bit more later on, but safe to say that's kind of most of it. There are several rats, and we can use them to try and refine our fighting prowess before we leave this cave and kind of get our head around how combat works. Even these rats can be quite challenging for a character that is lacking in the prerequisite skills. In this playthrough, I burned through a couple of stimpaks as my health got low. I got scared at an embarrassing early death when I realised that getting items from your inventory takes action points, making what you select in the 2 item slots quite important. I also have Fog of War turned on, something added in the official patch I believe, so I couldn't be sure how many rats still lay in wait for me. I do think that this setting might have caused me to crash later on, as it's not the most used setting. My character also found that all of the rats he checked were female, something that may be a coincidence or maybe it's pointing to life finding a way. At the end of the cave is a slightly cross-hatched area that when we walk into leads us from this area and into the sunlight for the first time in our entire 27 years.
Wow, how do you like our little town? Bored yet?
Crawling out from the Fallout, baby, we see the overworld for the first time. Unlike that fully realised 3D areas of the Bethesda titles, the original Fallout and its successor take place in separated area maps that traverse through this overworld screen. This does mean these original titles are set over a massively larger area, but that area is far less dense. Areas of interest are set out as green circles, and known areas are listed on the right hand side so that we can choose to move to them in the quickest direction. As we are new to the Wasteland, we only have our home vault, Vault 13, and the lead of a possible new water chip in Vault 15. The most sensible thing then to do is select Vault 15 and watch the Vault Dweller, that's us, saunter to the submerged safe. On that relatively short journey, we will cross over another unknown green circle. Naturally, it makes sense to stop and see what this new area is. The soft tug of developers' intentions is dragging us this way. The narrative hook that is laid out before us is giving us something to nibble at in the world, but just like the tabletop role-playing games that Fallout is founded decided on, there is no obligation to follow this path. In fact, we can go straight to the end of the game right away if you know where to look. I noticed over the years that more games are into pointing you in a direction and trying to convince you to go that way. Depending on how you lay out a level, you can naturally lead someone to the next spot without being too obvious about it. We didn't put a bunch of boulders in the path to say, you can't go this way. At this point in gaming, very few games had such freedom to explore, certainly not those with such strong stories. Yes, you had your dungeon delvers allowing you to explore to your heart's content, but many credit Fallout with being a path setter in its want to allow the player to not only explore a setting, but a fully realised world. With all of this, it would be easy to lose players in the vast expanse of endless possibilities, but this just isn't the case, as developers have been very austere with the information they give the player, and what they have given is very simple. An objective: find the water chip. A possible location: Vault 15. Freedom to forge your own path is available, but not necessary. And if we follow these breadcrumbs, we will discover a new location and have a choice whether to explore this avenue or carry on to Vault 15. The design choice is simple yet fundamentally important to Fallout, and I think it is as great in its effectiveness as the first screen of Super Mario. In this retrospective, I will explore the game following the sensible breadcrumbs that are laid out and critique the narrative and the design as they would most likely come up for the first time player, but I will cut to some unique and relevant differences that can occur if you take the path less travelled. So let's explore this new location, one unknown to those who shut themselves away in Vault 13. Welcome to Shady Sands. With time on our side, we know this will become the beating metropolitan heart of the new California Republic. Looking at this place, it seems a far cry from its destined fate. Our first impressions are that of a dusty world surrounded by a small sandstone wall. It seems that Shady Sands has its name for a reason. Before we can explore any of this location, we are stopped by a couple of residents telling us to put our weapon away. Something that is not a request, but mandatory if we wish to see the inside of this place. That is, the inside of this place with people inhabiting it. If we carry on with a weapon equipped, then we will initiate combat, and that is hardly a good idea. Instead, we must leave one of our item slots either empty or filled with something non-hostile. We can still have a weapon in the other slot, so we can quickly draw if needs be, and this kind of undermines the effectiveness of making us disarm, but the process does the purpose of reminding us that we are entering a civilian location, an area with rules that we must follow if we want to actually engage with its inhabitants. Though we don't have to engage with them if we don't want to, or even engage them in battle if that is what feels more up our alley. There are no radiant, invulnerable characters, and anything can be a target, something that very few games ever allow you to do. Even to this day, there seems to be some sort of way to keep someone alive if they really need to. This is also the first chance most will get to talk with an NPC in Fallout, and we can see that it follows basic video game conversation basics for the most part. We can select from a list of options, things to talk about, and then probe further if possible, and even react to the character's dialogue. What is less obvious is that there are certain factors that will affect the options you have available. I will show examples of this later, but I'll give an overview now. There is a reputation system of sort, which means that pissing people off can prohibit some possibilities. Having high charisma does allow you to say things others can't, and even intelligence can have a big say on how you communicate with others. These dialogue boxes also allow us to barter. Bartering is fairly straightforward. You put a lot of your items on one side, a load of their items on the other. If you meet or exceed their item value, the character will trade with you. This is how all traders are done, even with vendors. The bartering stat will alter the value of the selling goods and make people more likely to give you a good deal, but mechanically it just changes the worth of the item, not the process of buying and selling. It's a bit frustrating having these slightly unwieldy menus to navigate, and the iconic bottle caps that most people use for money can only be sent over in stacks of up to 999, which becomes a nuisance quite quickly when trading thousands of caps worth of goods. But we can see the system is very much adequate, and we can see that Fallout feel of deteriorated world come to life with its choice of currency. The inside of Shady Sands is desolate and depressing. It feels tired and empty and lacking in hope. The houses are small and far apart, and their outside mixes with the exterior, making them inseparable from the wild dunes that they sit inside. But the buildings are fully fledged buildings, not ruins, but post-apocalyptic form structures that have been built presumably from sandstone, like the perimeter wall. We can learn a little bit about the history of the settlement by Seth, the leader of the guards, and Katrina, who both stand at the doorway. He sadly doesn't have a talking head animation, but the amount of resources needed to do so, I can see why only certain important characters have it. We have a few hints of story and world building, learning that Katrina was from Vault 15, the ones that we were on our way to visit, but it was attacked when she was only little. She was rescued by the people of this town. We hear of Aradem, Aradesh, the leader of this community, and we're advised to talk to him and that there's a local merchant in town that may know a little bit more about the world. Lots of little story hooks and options for us to go on, and that we've gained by talking to the local people, all written very concisely and easy to understand while not just being bland pop-ups. We had another guy, Marco Green. He ended up writing a lot of spoken dialogue for the characters, and it was fantastic. His process for creating dialogue was so much more efficient than mine. It was really cool to watch, and working with him helped me do dialogue for games I've done since then. We get experience for learning about the world from Katrina, and this shows early on that we can get far in this world without always taking to fighting. There's also a more clear-cut side quest given to help deal with the rad scorpions that are attacking Shady Sands. The locals don't have enough manpower expertise, so would appreciate it if we help out. The interaction is very quick, and we could easily miss the intricacies of the dialogues, but Fallout is giving us breadcrumbs of world lore without forcing an exposition dump on us, and one more straightforward side quest helps the player early in the game not lose sight of what to do. The rest of the population are far less accommodating than these pair though, with them being miserable towards us. Most are unnamed peasants that we cannot barter or talk properly with. I didn't call them peasants, by the way, the game did, showing this town to not be the most thriving of places to be. There are also no children about. Why is this? Well, Fallout allows you to attack anything and anyone, and this didn't go down too well with censorships in places such as, well, Europe. Your views on this issue may vary, but there was clearly a need by developers to take away the ability to kill children in order to get access to these markets, and the easiest way was to remove children entirely. While this does take away from some of the supposed realism of Fallout, it also makes the game much more internally consistent, with you being able to kill anyone, no exceptions. If they left kids in but made them invulnerable, I think it would feel odd that they are the only things that are invulnerable in the world. And actually, it gives a gloomy feel to the wasteland that it truly is unforgiving, that children really aren't seen that often. You can get hold of mods or even older US versions of Fallout that still have children in it, but they really add very little to the story in the grand scheme of things anyway. So I didn't see it as important to get that running when I could just use a fully functioning version of the game. While there are many people that aren't able to be talked to, there are a couple that have a few more to say, such as Aradesh.
Greetings. Your business in Shady Sands might be...
He's the town elder. This is interesting because a town elder shows that there's a bit more of a tribal governance to this town that we might not expect of a future hub of major government. What is also interesting that he talks about Dharma. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. There's a quite obvious East Asian religious element to the people of Shady Sands, with many talking about Dharma, and they even name their herd Brahmin. Brahmin is a Southeast Asian word for cow and becomes the default name for the irradiate cows of the wasteland. However, future games ditch this more religious flavour, and that name is just a holdover. It's kind of interesting that Shady Sands has this little unique choice, and it definitely adds this unusual flavour that gives something new to this quite bland location. There isn't really any reason for this apart from a quirk of game designer that fancied adding this element in. I don't think that the tribal nature and the Southeast Asian religious elements are linked. I don't think it's a case of them trying to reinforce that by adding a slightly racist tone in. Talking to Aradesh and the other people of Shady Sands, we learn a little bit more about the world around us. This now translates to having certain markers on our map now highlighted, that of Junktown and the hub. This gives us new leads on where we might find a water chip, as these places are much more commercially active and have traders from all over. I tried to visit the doctor to see if I can get any healing supplies or if there's anything else they can tell me, but I get told to leave the house as it's well past bedtime and they don't really appreciate me entering their house at this time. Each character has their own routines and we can interact with them, but if it's late at night and someone is in their house, they'll think that you're up to no good. Still basic by today's standard that there are daily routines, but it makes the place feel more realistic, that you're interacting with a world that would exist with or without you. Just because you're a main character and you want to have a chat doesn't mean that someone wants you to get out of bed to have that chat with you. This in itself is not actually that remarkable, but remembering that we have a time limit to save our vault means that waiting around in order to talk to someone is a gameplay choice and not just an extra bit of faffing about. Today we don't necessarily see Fallout as the pinnacle of realistic worlds. The original Fallout has spent the first few minutes making you feel like you're in a fully realised world that is independent of player interaction. Before I leave Shady Sands, I think that this character would want to help out the best he could, so I go to see if I can deal with these rad scorpions that have been harassing the population. Knowing that this might be a bit difficult though, I feel like getting some help might be a bit prudent, and I go to check in with that merchant that the guards mentioned earlier. His name is Ian. And for a small fee, we can have him as our first companion. Originally, the developers didn't plan to have companions in Fallout. This is very much a dreary and unforgiving world that seems more set for a lone wanderer exploring the very nature of this new hostile world rather than a party of intrepid adventurers trying to complete their quest. It was only a last minute addition and it kind of shows. Ian will follow us somewhat blindly and we can chat to him about equipment and give him things as well as give him some minor instructions in how to deal with hostiles. But all these interactions happen through conversation chains which are quite repetitive, and that is really the extent to which we can engage with him or any of the other companions that we may be able to pick up on the story. And even these interactions are kind of irrelevant as most characters still do what they wish and not what we ask them to do. That's not to say they're useless, just that they're not very well designed. But as this is a RPG, I felt that my character would try and seek out help as they are a charisma-dominated character. This turns out to be quite prudent as I watch Ian single-handedly take out all these rad scorpions, hiding behind him and kiting these horrible creatures about. These cave graphics are very much reused tiles from earlier, however they seem to do their job well, and the design of the rad scorpions, which are essentially just big scorpions, are terrifying and really give you an idea of what this world is like. It's horrible. Again, Fallout is on point with its vision of this unforgiving world. We gain some experience, grab up as many scorpion towers as our inventory will allow us, and then we head back to Shady Scans for a whole bunch more experience. What I forgot to utilise earlier was the skill first aid, which would allow me to heal my character for tiny bits of HP for a few hours work. Instead I burnt through a lot of stim packs and then felt even more stupid when we returned to Shady Stands, fully healed by resting on our journey. Before going on any further, I sell these towels to the guards and exchange them for more ammo and crucially a rope. Buying this rope is an example of me knowing this game from previous playthroughs. It's something that arguably new players wouldn't think to do, though it's not beyond the realms of possibility that a new player would want a quite common utility item. The pair of us head on to Vault 15 to see the possibility of there being a water chip down there. I'm certainly more prepared than I would be if I went straight there. Not only do I have a companion who seems to be much better shot than I am, but I've also leveled up and improved my skills in small guns. Leveling up is quite straightforward. You see a little level up highlight and you go to your character screen. You see that you have skill points that you can spend and you assign them to different skills. What is increasingly becoming clear is that the skills that we need to improve are not restricted to our build. I improve small guns not just because I think that's something that my character would do, but also it's something that is important for any character. On the world map I can see all the additional markers for places that I've talked to people in Shady Sands about. Quite nearby and somewhat on the route to Vault 15 is another location of interest. This being a gang hideout. Well, more of a holdout because it's not that hidden considering I have a marker for it. After fighting a couple of these bandits at the entrance to this location, I quickly loot and get out of there before I die. I'm able to upgrade my armor for the first time and this makes me very much harder to hit with my AC going up a fair chunk. The items in this game are very much important even if there isn't that much in terms of variety. One thing I dislike about Fallout is that all characters of the same gender look the same if they're wearing the same outfit. That includes you, the playable character. It makes it quite hard to identify yourself sometimes, especially in locations that scroll for quite a while before going to a new screen. As the game is turn-based, you still have time to work out who you are, so it doesn't matter too much. It's just more annoying than anything. Before we get to Vault 15, we're also engaged in our first random encounter. To me, it's very reminiscent of classic JRPG battles in that we're taken from our overworld to engage in an encounter. Think like classic Final Fantasy or Pokemon. This one is a battle encounter against some mole rats, well, giant versions of the common Native American pest. Another level this time allows me to pick a new perk, showing the basis for a lot of the systems that are used throughout Fallout even to the modern day were very much conceptualized early on. All of these seem very much straightforward, and to the casual player, they seem quite balanced. But if you talk to anyone in the classic Fallout subreddit, you'll know that there are definitely ones that are seen as much better than others. In fact, there are whole builds that you can see are much more effective in this game than others, to the point where it kind of seems that some perks and some skills, and even the sum of the special stats, are redundant. Entering Vault 15 leads us to an empty field with just a shack in it. This doesn't look like it's the entrance to a vault, but going inside the shack we can see a ladder down, and using that we can see the vault entrance proper. I do really enjoy the big doors and their big chunky cogs already giving that pre-war tech vibe. Inside this vault everything seems broken and self-deprecated. We can learn a bit more about the world through examining these items and seeing their descriptions coming up on our Pip-Boy window. As I look around, I get stuck in a room by Ian. I sillily decided to walk down a narrow passageway with him following me, and now he's just standing in that doorway, stopping me getting out the passageway, and there's just no way I could get him to move without engaging him in combat. Luckily, this time he decides after a little while to wander a bit, and I take that opportunity to quickly run around the corner, but this happens more than once, and sometimes it leads me to having to reload my game. There is a lift shaft, but it's not working. What a surprise. It is not easy to descend this lift without a rope, it says on our little screen at the bottom. Luckily, I had the foresight to do so, and going into my inventory and using the rope on the elevator shaft allows us to descend down. Further down in Vault 15 we come across more mole rats and ordinary non-mole-like rats, killing them all as I become increasingly more effective at destroying them. Actually, some of these rats are called pig rats, but they use the same model as far as I'm aware. This place is just as broken as above, and I'm getting less and less confidence that we'll find what we're looking for. Using more rope to go down even further, we carry on with our vicious assault on the rat population of Vault 15. Ian runs out of bullets, and before I get a real chance to give him any more, he runs after more of the enemies, getting into combat without me. It's quite clear that he's taking on too many enemies for comfort, and I only can watch as he dies to the onslaught. Well, to be honest, I didn't try my hardest to save him, as he kept on getting in the way, and I kept getting stuck in doorways, and he was just getting on my nerves. Now, I scrounged as many goodies as I can from his body before realising I have nowhere further to go. I'm unsure what to do as I can't seem to be able to find the water chip anywhere. So I try and check the Pip-Boy for any sort of notes that I might have missed, but I can't see anything apart from the quest to find the water chip. Fallout doesn't give a lot of information on its quests. And while it's good that the game doesn't hold your hand too much and give you quest markers, there is a difference between being told everything and having some of your information recorded, and I wouldn't mind a bit more in-game note-taking. I think the reason I especially got frustrated with this here was that I missed the Pip-Boy's screen detailing the fact that we had searched Vault 15 and not found a water chip, and therefore needed to look elsewhere. And so I was just running around like a madman to see that very message come up. There's only roughly 6 lines of possible dialogue that can fit on that screen, at least at my resolution, and it's very much easy to miss crucial details that come up. To me, this is something that is very important for the story that is far too easily missed, being purely on that small little part of the screen, especially if we can't get that information to come up on that screen again by re-examining something. If we saw a terminal that hosted the water chip that when we examined told us that it wasn't here, then at least if we missed it at first we could try and see it a second time.
Junktown, it ain't what it used to be. The only reason it's still here is because of my gambling establishment.
Junktown is made of junk. It's the most reminiscent of modern Fallout I think you get in the original game. You can see the local community here have reclaimed broken debris, rusted cars, and whatever else they could get their hands on to create a strong barrier against the wild. The guards here are more clearly defined with their combat armor. However, again, they look like our main protagonist, as I'm also wearing the same thing. I'm asked to put away my weapon, as I do, and enter the town properly. Junktown has a lot more going for it, with more people to talk to, different avenues to explore, and even factions to negotiate around. One of the main go-tos is a character called Killian Darkwaters. He runs a local general store and is the de facto mayor of the town, keeping a degree of law and order as he organises the guards. There's a minor faction called the Skags, a bunch of rowdy gang members who want to rough up the place but are kept somewhat in check by Killian. But Killian's main rival is a man called Gizmo, who runs a local casino and has many more hands in many more pies. Despite the surroundings, Junktown is more of a traditional community as we would expect in an RPG, and so we can engage in a lot more than we could in Shady Sands. We have a dedicated shop with Killian, and though you still barter in the same way, he has much more goods than anyone we would have come across so far. There's a bar where we can have a drink, and we can stay at a hotel if we need to rest, and we can finally use our gambling skill at that casino. I'm not going to go into every single possible quest and interaction. After a certain point, you're not really getting to learn more about the game except for how to navigate certain quests, but we will look at some choice examples in how to illuminate this world's possibilities. The most prominent slice of additional content here is all about the Gizmo Killian divide. In very basic terms, you don't like each other and they want to stop you with interfering with their goals. You can learn a bit about both by talking to them, and they both have animated talking heads.
Get your butt in here and sit down.
We got some business to discuss.
Killian may be a bit straight-laced to the point of suffocating the town's ability to compete with the other trading town of the hub, but there is little in terms of ethical debate here. We either do the good thing or the bad thing. Good actions in Fallout are not in dispute according to the game because the game has a karma system that inherently rates all the actions and therefore can tell you what is evil and what is not evil in this world. We may not agree with this, but in a metaphysical sense, it is what we are told what actions are intrinsically good and bad. I think that's quite an interesting thing to discuss and dissect, and I do talk about Fallout in my video on how ethics are implemented in game design that I will link in the description, as I think it's an interesting topic and no one has bloody watched it. But this karma system is quite well hidden, and unless you really go out of your way, there's little interaction with it besides a number score. We always had this idea of, were people going to try to be good or bad? How would we track that? That turned into the karma meter, which was a very simplistic way of saying, you did something good? Here, have a positive number, and if you did something bad, here's a negative number. We have no way to tell the difference in that game between somebody who never did something good or bad versus someone who killed a bunch of orphans but then donated a lot of money. But we had no way of telling the difference. They were both neutral, but just the addition of that meter and the player's knowledge that their actions were being tracked, that major events in the game added a positive or negative number to that meter, suddenly made them think about what they were doing. I enjoy the exaggerated nature of Gizmo, being both physically and personally repulsive. His talking head is absurdly bloated and his world sprite is attached to his office chair. This man is all about greed, hedonism and self-interest. After our first interaction with Killian, Gizmo sends an assassin to deal with Killian. It's quite a pivotal encounter as we see the world interact around us and we can purely choose to observe. If we sit back and watch, what tends to happen is that the assassin is taken out by the massive guards that surround us in the general store, but sometimes the assassin can get in some timely shots and RNG can end up with Killian dead before we really get to know what's going on in this town. As we have learned, we can kill anyone at any time and so we can help the assassin, but this is inadvisable as you tend to be outgunned and this sidesteps the side quest. The other option is to be a saint and help the guards take out the assassin. While seeming straightforward, it can be quite a tricky endeavour, not due to the assassin being hard to kill, but because it's really easy to hit other people in the game. If you roll badly and miss your shot, you will likely hit Killian or his guards, and even the greatest shot in the world has a not insignificant chance to miss. If you help Killian, it will lead to some extra lines with him and a more positive reception, though I did manage to end up in a situation with Killian thanking me, but his guard shooting me for a wild miss shot. Not only was this odd, but it felt unfair. I had acted to try and save this man, it was recognised by him, but his guards couldn't understand that there was a misfire, and there's no way to unbridle their anger. I can't put my hands up and say sorry. You could argue that if I wanted to try and stop an assassin, I should probably have the skills to do so and spec into a more combat-oriented build. That Fallout is just representing how others react to people who widely shoot. The counter to this argument would be that, however, the protagonist is treated the same as if they intentionally shot and killed Killian, despite this being a completely different case, and therefore requires a different response. No RPG can consider the vast array of potential intentions that a player may have when making an action. However, this feels a bit janky in how easy it is to make a mistake, and that not being considered by hostiles, especially when you did much more damage to their foe. Anyway, I do find it quite funny how negative Killian could be towards you if you insult the town for being a bit boring.
Well, if we're too fast for you, just pass on by, pal. It is pal, ain't it?
I think this small thing actually gives him quite a bit of depth, as he's easily annoyed when people dismiss the hard work of this town and subsequently himself to become an established part of the wasteland. Getting back to the factional struggle, the choice is then, do we take Gizmo up on his offer of riches to kill Killian, with Gizmo putting in no complications on that offer, just asking for the proof of Killian's dog's tags when killed. What is a bit of an outlier in Fallout is that you can't actually just steal the dog's tags from Killian and lie to Gizmo that you killed him, which is something I imagined Fallout with its commitment to choice would allow you to do. You can only take the dog tags off his corpse. Killian wants to deal with Gizmo, but is also trying to uphold law and order. He needs distinct proof of Gizmo's evil plans from us. He gives us a tape recorder and a bug that we can use to record Gizmo's guilt. As a disclaimer, I do want to say that those who play more of these CRPGs may be a bit more in tune to what is necessary to do here, but I found this side quest a bit difficult to achieve due to the way that some of the objects work. It seems quite straightforward that all we have to to do is take these items to Gizmo's office, get into a conversation with him, and convince him to implicate himself. At first I wasn't sure whether I had to sneak inside Gizmo's office when planting the items, but it's not required and we can do what we need just in front of him. However, I used the bug and the tape recorder the wrong way around, planting the recorder in his bookcase and the bug on myself. Neither of these items give any information, and I thought that the bug planted on myself, not in the room, felt more natural. I was confused as to why Killian wasn't accepting the proof at first. In the end, I had to look it up online exactly what I'd done incorrectly, not realising that I just simply used the items the wrong way around. Then I managed to fail the side quest as I didn't know that I couldn't kill Gizmo after I had got the proof myself, and instead had to go to Killian first. It isn't a big deal, but occasionally in Fallout I did find a bit of a gap between the intentions that I had when attempting something and what actually happened. Sometimes for a bit of lack of clarity on the game's part and a bit of a gap of familiarity with the systems. Later I struggled to understand how to engage with the Junktown's doctor's secrets, as it wasn't clear to me what was really going on and what was legally allowed by myself. Nowadays we deplore the over-detailed explanation of what to do in every situation, but here we can see the opposite issue of not knowing how to solve a problem, as some of the actions don't pan out like we expect. Good thing I remembered to save often, which is what you should do in any old game that you're not an expert at. If you kill Gizmo without proof, Killian will thank you but also banish you from the town, which is a fitting consequence of the actions you undertake. Despite my complaints, I really enjoy Junktown. With its dystopian look juxtaposed with its familial nature, it feels markedly different from Shady Sands in that people have more sense of self-determination and we can get far more involved in the way the town functions and its inhabitants. We may not be far from Shady Sands, but the sense of scale is dramatically changed with how much we can get distracted by. In terms of the main quest, we find very little here, with just hints of other vaults in South California that may have had a chip, and also that the hub would be a good place to find some more information. The vault dweller is being led south. But before we leave Junktown, there's one resident that we should definitely get more acquainted with, and that is Dogmeat Mark 1. The faithful companion of many Fallout protagonists, Dogmeat is a favourite reoccurring character. Well, arguably a reoccurring character. The character that people liked the most was Dogmeat, because Dogmeat didn't have any area of effect attack. He would just simply run up and bite someone. I love Dogmeat because he's so loyal. I'm like, no, you love Dogmeat because he has no dialogue attached, and because of that he can never leave the party. Also, Dogmeat does melee attacks, so he can never hurt you. He would have hurt players just as much as Ian or Tycho. He just never had the opportunity to do so. So it's funny to me when people would say, we love how you make the dog so loyal. No, we didn't do that. That's just the way that things shook out. In order to win the loyalty of Dogmeat, you have to help a man named Phil get into his house that has been blocked by an irate dog. Talking to the people around, you learn that a lone wanderer had visited Junktown with his beloved dog before passing away. You can either feed Dogmeat some iguana on a stick or wear a leather jacket that is reminiscent of his previous owner. In doing so, Dogmeat won't leave your side. Well, till death do us part. This is the hub, well named for being the centre of commerce and riches, but also scum and villainy. The hub has become large enough that it has its own economic disparity between classes, with some people living in slums while others live in luxury. This city is also the only one that has no fixed perimeter in order to stave off the dangers outside, and instead has grown beyond this, and people seem to survive by numbers. At the entrance to the city, we are met by a vast amount of people forming trade caravans. Caravan merchants are the big players here, with the city revolving around them and their influences. They run the roost as an oligarchy, and we can engage with the politics of the three caravan companies and their fairly fragile alliances. Their prominence has led to the city being flush with traders, with these being the only merchants in the game that specialise in specific goods, a weapon shop being the top of my list to visit. However, the way that wealth has been hoarded has also left many without, as we can see when we visit Old Town. The importance of water is reaffirmed in the hub by its wealth being driven by its hugely successful water caravans. There's some quite in-depth lore to how the competing caravans companies ended up dealing with the water company being run at less exorbitant prices. Yes, there is order in the hub, but you can tell that it can be quite shady with a lot of things going on under the hood, and the hub does a great job of easily conveying this economic tangle. The townsfolk are using repurposed ruins, however, it's shaped into a city that feels consistent and plausible in this fairly implausible world. There's a lot of stuff going on in the hub, and this can make it quite difficult to know where to head to at first, but by this stage you will want to explore more and see what more is on offer in Fallout. You could end up being struck by analysis paralysis by the vast amount of options that are available to you. First time players may still be a bit reluctant to venture more into the realms of side quests due to that ticking time bomb of the main quest. Having a time limited main quest in an RPG RPG is very rare to see. This is often because RPGs sell themselves on the vast expansive worlds that they want you to explore. Giving you a timed quest then means that you're unable to explore everything that's out there. It's kind of rare in all games, to be honest. The only one that really comes to mind at this time of writing is the original Dead Rising. Why would you put this kind of pressure on a player? It's quite clear that casual player will be dissuaded from exploring more of the wasteland. You'll feel the need to speed through places as fast as possible instead of tackling them in a more strategic way. This can force mistakes and be quite stressful, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. However, there are advantages to having this timed quest that may outweigh these issues. While you may not be able to explore every inch of the map in one playthrough, you can always just start again and try new ways to solve the main quest. I and many others find that in expansive RPGs that we try and achieve everything in one playthrough, instead of replaying the same game, looking at new and unique ways of approaching the challenges that it's presented. Having this timed quest gives us a reason to replay Fallout, as we probably know that we could find more new things in the California Wasteland, giving you a reason to try new solutions to problems you've already encountered. Fallout is actually quite short a campaign, but the focus was more on the depth of its interactions, meaning that approaching this replayability is certainly intentional. I'd also say that while the pressure of the main quest is quite stressful for a new player in particular, this stress all feeds into that realism that has been constantly reinforced. It doesn't make sense that we can take our time on an issue and problem that is supposed to be an imperative, and any deviations have got to be accounted for. This emphasizes the role-playing aspect of this game. Originally, this time limit was supposed to be much harsher, and there were other time-based interactions to occur later on in the story. However, the complexities of this made it difficult for a small team, and there was also some pushback against this original time limit. This means you actually have a lot of leeway in achieving your goals, though an unknowing player may not feel that way. Unfortunately, due to moving house, I've had quite a few technical errors while making this video, and a lot of this footage, about 5 to 6 hours, has no audio. So I've added the backing track of the area that I'm in, and I've found the corresponding NPC voice lines, but there will be a lack of certain audio cues such as fighting noises, inventory clicks, and the like. I'm sure many of you can get over this, but I thought I would notify you anyway. While there are many different avenues to explore, the hub still is a place run on water, and that is the obvious place to examine for the main quest. Talking to the water merchants, we can learn a lot about the history I alluded to earlier, but we also get told that they cannot help us, at least not directly. We can get some hints of a vault nearby with a possible water chip, but we also get given the option to negotiate the water caravans to deliver shipments to our vault. This is all offered at the low price of 2,000 bottle caps. Depending on how quick you've made it to the hub, you may have more or less caps, but it's likely you will not have this kind of cash lying about burning a hole in your pocket. Following these breadcrumbs, we've kind of been told of a possible location for the main quest, but also have the chance to extend this deadline using the water merchants. And if you follow this Hansel and Gretel-like path directly, you will unlikely have the caps needed to do so, leaving you stranded in a city full of side content with an incentive to make money. What a great way of getting a player to adventure outside the main quest, even if they're worried about this time limit. So let's earn these 2,000 caps and learn more about the hub.
So, you're looking for a job. How fortunate. I have one that needs doing.
In the centre of the town is the market with many opportunities to earn cash. Most obviously, you have the caravan companies allowing you to join their journeys as a guard. The only downside to this is that they leave at specific dates, and therefore waiting about for them to leave isn't a good use of time. Again, this is another element of the game putting that pressure on the player while reaffirming that the world exists outside of the player's actions. If we want to stay within the hub, there are plenty more people who are willing to make deals with us. There's the vast underbelly of crime in the city with its criminals both cruel and kind. Decker, while polite, has control of a lot of the city via blackmail and force. In Old Town there's also another secret group, this one a lot harder to get in contact with as they're hidden behind several locked doors and rigged explosives. This group is the Circle of Thieves run by Loxley, an homage to Robin Hood of Loxley with even a terribly acted and written accent to boot.
Bloody fine job making it through the defences, mate. I'm rather impressed. Toss me your name.
He does take from the rich and give to the poor and offers you the opportunity to do so as well, getting back at the companies ripping off the hub's denizens. Attempting to help Loxley, however, is a difficult task as you have to steal a necklace from the guarded complex of Hightower, powerful businessman and caravan owner. My skills were not up to it and I kept on failing. I'm sure I could achieve this by saving and reloading plenty of times to achieve these goals, but sneaking was never this character's strong suit. Let's instead try and help the police seek justice and take Decker in. While it might be easier to side with him and probably more lucrative, my character doesn't like his antics. I get into a firefight and I just couldn't do a thing. I tried reloading, tried taking chems such as buff out, and while these helped, they just didn't do enough. I needed levels and skills. The hub is a place to make money, but my charismatic jack-of-all-trade build was just not able to utilize this.
Your bones are scraped clean by the desolate wind. Your vault will now surely die, as you have.
In the end, I wandered back to Junktown, took out some gangs there who were more my level, made it in time to join a caravan, and finally made the necessary caps to purchase the water deliveries, though Dogmeat didn't make it. I thought I'd see what the Overseer thought of this, travelling all the way back home. It turns out the vault is actually explorable and that we can talk to the residents and visit the Overseer in his imposing and all-powerful control chair.
The water caravans from this hub place have started to arrive. The caravan water will maintain our current supply, but not increase it substantially. We're taking a terrible risk by showing these people the way to our vault. I understand your choice, and it may be what saves us, but I'm worried.
Back to finding the water chip, with the next lead being Necropolis and the vault that may lurk beneath. On the way, I visit Shady Sands and get involved in another short quest when I'm told that Tandy, the Elder's daughter, has been captured in a raid by the nearby gang. Due to the fact that I'd earlier fought some of the gang, I was unable to talk to anyone and use my greatest strength to my advantage, and instead had to fight my way through. While I was victorious, it was a close run thing and I'd used all my stimpaks in the last few encounters. My charisma based approach was not doing me any favours to make up for the lack of punching power I had. It meant that as I levelled, I instead thought to focus on more practical affairs and stuffed everything into energy weapons, hoping to get hold of one soon. Luckily, through more hope than judgment, I was able to lockpick the cell door to Tandy and return her home, with the disappointment of only experience as my prize.
I'm not that kind of girl, mister. Go find a Brahma or something.
Set a wuss. He think he run place, but we run.
The city literally is called the City of the Dead, and it doesn't disappoint with us being greeted by ghouls on our arrival. We've met a couple of ghouls before, but this is the first time we get any real time with them. Obviously, from the low resolution and small sprites, we can't really gather much from what they are like, but we do get a bit of a description from the Pip-Boy, which describes them often as zombies. This is amplified by their slow, small shuffling that does really invoke the Night of the Dead. However, not all of them will attack us on sight, and if you enter down into the sewers, you will come across some peaceful ghouls who will tell you a bit about the lay of the land. It turns out these ghouls were residents of a vault under the city that leaked radiation, slowly turning them into their current form. At this current point, most of the ghouls are led by Set, a fierce and cruel leader that shuns outsiders. Though he has banished those who don't agree with him, he has let them live in the sewers in case he ever needs the manpower against an outside force. Interesting stuff, but what's more is that there is a water chip that is still functional in their old vault, though it is guarded by Set. These peaceful ghouls explain that they will die without this water though, and beg us not to take this chip unless we are able to fix the water pump station first. Depending on how you see the ghouls and the skills that you have, you can approach this however you want, the only necessity being reaching that water chip. We can talk to Set himself, who has a fleshed out talking head, and I mean that literally. In one word, ugly.
There'd better be a killer reason for standing in my shadow. Does next on the menu ring a bell for ya? Normie.
Set is the definitive ghoul with a talking head, and his appearance is reminiscent of an Iron Maiden cover, decayed, withered skin mixed with unusual growths, creating a dichotomy of a face. From Set, we are again given a choice to help him or fight him, as he's been having trouble with another Fallout staple, that of the super mutants. And when we finally see them outside the pump station, they give off a suitably imposing presence. They are massive, and this comes across in the way that they are hulking on the screen, kind of reminding me of an orc with their greenish tinge, overly muscled shape, and hunched stature. The ghouls, while quite scary looking, did not give off a sense of trepidation, unlike these super mutants, and despite my character not being that sneaky, I was anxious to avoid them. You can get remarkably close without them engaging you, but we still get caught as we try to enter the pump station.
Hey, you not look like ghoul. How come?
This is Harry. The close-up of Harry's face only reiterates the image that the sprites have evoked. A brutish, oversized face coloured a dirty green and shaped like a Neanderthal. What also jumps out is the exposed teeth that jut out like a broken fence, exposed by a leather strap that holds his upper lip up. I'm trying to avoid too much comparison with later games, as this is a retrospective, and therefore I want to give an idea of what the game's felt like at release, but I cannot help but complain about the modern Fallout super mutant design that is far less interesting and unique. While I mentioned these mutants are very much orc-coded, they also possess a lot of interesting design qualities that have disappeared slowly over the following iterations. Their anvil of a jaw, their extreme indented eyes, and most prominently that mouth strap that make these monsters all that more monstrous and intriguing. Nowadays they're just big green men, and that is a shame. Bethesda could really set these beasts apart from other big monsters, but instead have reverted to a boring mean. As for Harry himself, he gives us the impression that the super mutants might have that extra brawn to make up for the lack of brains as he questions you on why you don't look like the rest of the ghouls. If he realises that we are in fact not a ghoul, then we have a choice. We can either be taken to his boss or fight our way through. We'll talk about his superiors later, but fighting is not a good idea unless you're really prepared for it, and my character certainly isn't. Luckily enough, my speech is high enough that I can instead convince him that I am a ghoul. If the rest of the super mutants are like this, I may have a chance. It can be hard to know when and where charisma and other skills play a role in Fallout, as skill checks are hidden unless we actively make them. This helps to not take us out of the game, but also can make you underappreciate some of the skills that you use. This interaction also undermines the tension that has been built by first encountering these beasts, as they come across as a bit ridiculously stupid. Underneath the water pump station is the entrance to another vault, inhabited by other glowing ghouls who seem to worship the radiation. There's little fanfare when you finally retrieve the water chip from the vault. It just pops up in the dialogue box. The main reaction comes from the glowing ones who attack you for taking it. I have no issue taking them out, as there is an indication that these ghouls within the vault were killers, as on the floor by them is a dead trader. It isn't said outright, but there's a haunting nature to the nameless man sprawled dead amongst these mutated people. There are many instances like this where the scenery implies certain things have occurred but lets you wallow in its ambiguous nature. We know we can head back to Vault 13 as a saviour, but as always, we have got the chance to follow up on other curiosities and quests. For this character, I made sure to repair the generator for the water pump in order to help the kind ghouls who led me there in the first place. This side quest can be achieved by having a high enough repair skill and using that skill on the pump. This character's skill is quite low, but I was able to find some spare parts in order to make the check easier for myself, though I did save beforehand just in case I rolled badly. I could avoid this cheesy behaviour if it felt too cheaty, but I wanted to be the ultimate nice guy in this case. There are a few quests that are similar to this one in which we can achieve our goals by passing a check that can be made easier by going out of our way to collect the right equipment. This allows players to feel immersed by their character's strengths and weaknesses, but allows them not to be gatekept from the content, as they can always just do that little bit more in order to make it easier. And if worse comes to worse, there are always chems that alter your special stats at the risk of becoming addicted. One problem that is rife throughout Fallout though is that it's hard to work out what is purely scenery and what is interactable and functioning. This has you clicking at everything in order to work out what does what in the scenery. You do get a better hand at it as you progress, but it did take me a while to find what was the pump I needed to repair. This is more of an annoyance than a hindrance, but there are cases where I nearly gave up on the solution to a problem because I didn't think it was possible, only to find out later that I was doing it at the wrong location. We return once again to Vault 13 to be greeted by the Overseer.
Just wanted to let you know that the water supply is stabilized. Actually, we're rebuilding our reserves.
You did great.
I am a little concerned, however. I don't like your reports. What was in the reports, that is. In fact, they scared the heck out of me. It's those mutants. I've done some calculations and... well, I've come to an unpleasant conclusion. The mutant population is far greater than could be expected by natural growth or mutations. This leads me to believe, I don't really understand it, but it looks like someone's generating new mutants, and at a startling rate. As long as someone is creating hostile mutants at this rate, the Vault's safety is at stake. Find and destroy this lab as soon as you can. You have no idea how sorry I am to send you back out.
The super mutant threat, a threat to the Vault life and existence as we know it. The only concrete lead came in the form of the big boys who offered to show me their leaders themselves. Something that doesn't seem too prudent, especially when I couldn't take down a group of petty thieves on my own. In a more old school fashion, the Overseer gives us little in the way of tangible leads. This is to be expected. We are the expert of the wilderness. Our conversation and discovery should be much more reliable than anything the Overseer can tell us. The early game gave us a trail of breadcrumbs, but expects us now to have learnt more about the place we inhabit in order to solve this problem. We can see clearly how this would mirror a tabletop role-playing game. I'm not as hostile to map markers as many and think that they can work, but here it wouldn't be appropriate. The fun of the quest, of Fallout in general, is to explore this sandbox and figure the solutions for ourselves. We are detectives in this world, and we have to use our character's skills, whatever they may be, now to find the right solutions. One potential lead is via the Brotherhood of Steel, the people with the big guns and even bigger armor. Talking to them may lead you to some answers, but even if they don't lead to them answers, it will certainly lead to some better equipment. The only issue is that they require you to do a quest in order to be accepted, one that they believe is impossible, to visit the Glow.
You have to go to the ruins of the Ancient Order that's south of here. You've got to go inside and bring back something that proves that you were there. You'll do it. You will? Great, just bring it back here. Good luck.
The Glow is a location at the far southeast of the map, secluded and highly irradiated. If people mention this place, they say it's death to all due to its high radioactivity. The Glow somewhat uniquely has its own presence on the world map, as it's clearly a crater hit extensively during the Great War of 2077. Maybe beneath its depths we'll find out why. Even at the outskirts of the crater we received large doses of radiation, something that hasn't really been a worry until now. Despite the wasteland being full of irradiated monsters, we've been relatively fine exploring amongst it. Being radiated will lower our special stats until we die, with the only quick cure being Radaway, a chem that we can become addicted to. We can also take Rad-X in order to increase our resistance. I made sure to stock up on both just before coming. To actually enter the crater, we have to use a rope on this outstretched beam. I brought a rope just in case, but it took me more than a fair share of radiation looking for the right part of the crater to interact with. I found the Glow to be exceptionally terrifying as we get the aforementioned tense horror of retro tech, loneliness and creeping soundscape, all of which have been elevated with torch skeletons and clunky robots lying still amongst the ruins. The robots themselves, robo-brains especially, are truly harrowing. Despite having that charming old sci-fi feel with their tube arms, the fact that they're lying still and lifeless just adds so much dread. All of this is paired with that hidden time of radiation, making us think, how long can we fend it off? On this first encounter, on my first time entering the Glow, I was only able to get down one level, using one keycard, finding an old Brotherhood paladin who'd succumbed to this pit. This was enough to gain me entrance to the Brotherhood, but still many more mysteries lay beneath that I felt unequipped to explore. Truly, this is the most memorable experience of the playthrough, and one that I think Fallout excels at. I had to use my charisma to the best of my ability to gain the resources needed to endure this location, getting what I needed, but still wanting more. Another character may be better suited at exploring and surviving these challenges, but may have lacked the equipment that I had to my disposal. When we're finally granted access into the Lost Hill bunkers of the Brotherhood of Steel, we can see that this faction is unlike any other we've encountered in the Wasteland. They have a level of technology that is only rivaled by the Vaults, but they have the guns to back it up. Like the Vaults, their society is very authoritarian, with an Elder Council and their leader Maxon making decisions top down, with the rest of their society filling roles either as militant paladins or studious scribes. Unlike the Vaults, their society also has a clear goal to acquire as much tech as possible to study and keep it from the outside world. The ethics of this are obviously questionable, with those inside benefiting from many of the scientific advantages while the Wasteland fights for its survival. But they see themselves as protectors, and just like the Overseer, they are becoming worried about this mutant threat. Whether we agree or not seems to be superfluous when so much is at stake, and I leverage this military dictatorship to provide the necessary gear to scout the Northwest, where these mutants have appeared. Well, no, I didn't do it yet, as I didn't really feel all that prepared. The ammo and armor I gained from the Brotherhood was helpful, but I knew that this character was a fast talker, not a quick shooter, and I needed better equipment and skills to survive. There were plenty of things I could attempt in order to better set myself for the super mutants, and in all honesty I did most of them, failing several times at many. I also had an issue with the game crashing, something that I have not experienced when I played this game back in the day, and it did seem to be alleviated but not fixed by GOG Galaxy updating. I will not go through the whole journey as it isn't all necessary for this retrospective, but I will mention what was new and noteworthy. One place I hadn't visited yet was the Boneyard in the ruins of LA. With a name that's similar to Necropolis, you'd expect another town of the dead, but this place was very much alive, just not the most welcoming. There is a settlement of Adderton that is constantly being raided by a local gang called the Blades that we may choose to eliminate or perhaps even side with. In the search for caps and experience, I decided to see this gang, and I was surprised that they were very much more polite and welcoming than Adderton ever was. If you ask questions before a shooting, you can easily work out that the town of Adderton was being attacked in a false flag fashion by a faction within Adderton, the Regulators. They were using the Blades as folly to cement their own power. While this ends up being a good faction versus evil faction situation, the way in which we get there is different enough to make it more interesting. If we want to get rid of the Regulators, we can use the Blades' help by supplying them with weapons via another group in the Boneyard, the Gunrunners. This is a gang-turned weapons dealer that now deals with a high-level munition, finding it more profitable to sell guns than shoot them. It's rather odd that they run their operation through a warehouse that is surrounded by a literal glowing moat, with the centre of the boneyard being rather well grounded and gritty. This feels rather ostentatious. Getting to the Gunrunners is hard enough anyway, as there is an area between them and the rest of the settlements that is crawling with the most notorious of creatures, Deathclaws. These things are truly horrible and hit like a truck. They can easily kill a character by bypassing their armor with their off-rolled criticals, and they're a sponge for ammo. Despite this, they are highly underwhelming. And why do I say this? Throughout Fallout, you hear hearsay and rumor about these creatures, that they are a myth or a legend.
Myths and legends. The Deathclaw is supposedly a ghost or something.
That none who come across them survive, with many wondering if they exist at all. But here they are in the middle of this location, and everyone here seems to know. They look slightly goofy in their appearance, and yes, while they hit hard, they're quite easy to run away from. I find it even more odd that the Gunrunners will happily supply the Blades with weapons if we get rid of these Deathclaws, something that according to some characters would put us on par with Theseus killing the Minotaur, but to the Gunrunners it's just pest control. Not only that, but killing one Deathclaw is arguably much harder than getting rid of all of the Regulators altogether at once, and that was actually something I managed to do. Thrice actually, due to the game crashing. During one of these attempts, a random town person was clipped by a stray bullet from the Regulators, leading to the whole town rising up, and while janky, especially with the fog of war on, it felt very thematic and on point. From this point onwards though, I did very much lean into the slight jankiness of the combat system, utilising doorways and other characters as protection so that enemies became distracted, shot one another, and filed in one by one. I do not see this as a big stick to beat Fallout with though, as it's hardly the only tactical game that can be exploited by positioning. The last area to explore in the Boneyard is the library run by the followers of the Apocalypse, led by Nicole.
Greetings! Hey! We're very glad you could join us. We hope you have found our humble abode to your satisfaction.
They're worried about another faction that we've come across, that of the Church of the Unity. You can dismiss this as just a religious feud, but she tells you of Nightkin, another name for super mutants, meaning that there is more than meets the eye going on in that church. And yes, in the original Fallout, Nightkin is a name that's used sporadically as a term for all super mutants rather than a specific type. Though it tends to be used to refer to stronger, more articulate mutants, it isn't actually used exclusively that way. The followers of the Apocalypse are opposed to violence when possible, but have infiltrated the main headquarters of this cult, and they give us a passcode to tell to our agent on the inside if we wish to investigate further. Just like the Gunrunners, they feel like a natural inclusion in Fallout, but a bit clumsily included. They are surrounded by the deadliest enemies, both human and beast, yet live happily and safely in this ungoverned land. I think they would have made more sense in either Junktown or the Hub, but the relation that they have to this cult plotline probably meant that the developers wanted them a bit harder to stumble across early on. There are plenty of side quests and areas to revisit, but one of the ones that I was eager to most was the glow. In order to reach the lower levels, the atmosphere draws you in while also pushing you away, and amongst the wreckage we find a few secrets. Zax is a massive supercomputer turned AI that oversaw the facility both before and after the Great War, and was the custodian for a great many West Tech projects, including the development of power armor now in the hands of the Brotherhood. Zax also oversaw the development of the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, the reason that this facility was targeted so heavily in the war. While essentially a lore dump, Zax can be used to turn off the robots that will engage you if you are able to restore the power to the base. Zax can also bait you into playing chess with it, which you will almost certainly lose, and you'll get no benefit and receive a major radiation dose while you do so. The last accessible level is level 5, and it provides you with some amazing equipment and even more lore. There are 3 data discs that you can download to your Pip-Boy and read. I actually only found one, though it easily was the most important. It details the extensive research experiments into the forced evolutionary virus, and how it mutated organisms into hulking versions of themselves, with the final words being a refusal from them to operate on humans. It is clear that FEV is the source of the mutants, but the research was moved to the Mariposa military base, a location we haven't discovered. While the glow can be a bit heavy with its exposition, it is an optional and very difficult and puzzled area, and it makes it feel like a decent reward along with the new powerful equipment buried beneath its depth. I finally acquire a holodisc that I can use to store information. I wish there was more uses of this, or the player was able to store their own notes on their Pip-Boy, but the only way to gain information is by downloading these holodiscs, which means that it's limited to those who have the tech to use them. A minor point that bugs me is the information is stored in the status screen of the Pip-Boy that is overwhelmed with data, while the archive sections is underutilized and feels like the natural place to store this archived information. The location of the mutants is in the northeast according to the Brotherhood, and the area will find the military base, but before we get there I want to be in that funky power armor. Asking about this, does seem to be several ways of acquiring it from the Brotherhood, but most come down to fixing some broken unwanted parts, something this character is no good at. Instead I'll earn some brownie points by rescuing an initiate who's been captured by Decker at the hub. Bish, bash, bosh, and I'm fully decked out, skilled in energy weapons, armed to the hilt, and looking dashing in my new power armor.
Guards, take him to his cell and prepare him for the dipping. He'll tell us where his vault is when he's one of us.
Approaching the northeast leads to us being surprised by various patrols of super mutants. The type of engagements that you encounter will change dependent on where you are. This acts both as a way to make the world seem more coherent, as well as a soft block to lower level characters. These patrols also contain new hideous monsters that are unlike anything we would know from pre-war Earth. The floaters are a grotesque mass of flesh that have formed into a sperm-like shape, resting on their tail and flailing at us with their heads. Then there are the centaurs that look like the remains of several people morphed into one, with their extra limbs scrambling like an insect with 2 torsos emerging above. Despite the power armor and extra levels, the super mutants still pack a punch and a half with their high strength and dangerous equipment, but that equipment is also to their detriment, with it spraying all over the place and constantly killing their own. I'm not a proud man and happily use these enemies as human-like shields. However, reaching the outskirts of the base, seeing the mutants patrolling, I decide that discretion is the better part of valor and head back to the Brotherhood to tell them that this super mutant threat, yeah, it's very much real. I inform Maxim and then convince the elders to help me by sending a small crack team to help me infiltrate the building. While seeming slightly forced that we don't send the full might of the Brotherhood, it means that we have some friends when we arrive back to assault the base. It seems that this would have been easy enough without them actually, especially as the mutants end up killing one of their own. I'd picked up a radio earlier in the game and decided to try and see if it would call the Brotherhood to update the situation or something. Instead it patches me through to a super mutant organizer. There is a squeal of static and then you hear a deep voice over the radio. Command to patrol? Command to patrol? What is your status? Over. Nothing is wrong here. We're fine. How are you? I try the Star Wars reference in order to trick the commander, and this somehow works, and I gain some experience. Looting reveals a passcode on a broken holodisc that I use to enter the base proper. My Brotherhood friends, or what was left of them, remain to secure the perimeter. Again, I feel a bit hard done by. I utilise my speech, but I'm still left alone, and it's up to me to assault this fortress on my own. Inside the area is much cleaner than we may have expected, and it's in full working order, including these annoying force field transmitters that bar the way. I try my science on them, and I'm not able to turn them off as my skill is quite low, but learn that the red ones are passable, albeit they still hurt us. The next few levels consist of a lot of fighting and investigation to the various tidbits around. I was finally able to enjoy the combat, having got more into the swing of it and having trained my energy weapon skill to a point where using aim shots felt very powerful. With my plasma rifle taken from the glow, I was able to hit most enemies in the eyes from a fair distance, though it wasn't a walk in the park with these big guns possessed by the super mutants very easily bypassing my defenses. I was heavily using chems to overcome these harder hits and give me some survivability. ability. I'm able to garner some information from computers and find the force field controller, but I'm unable to do much with it due to my underlevel science skill and my intelligence being smacked down due to my heavy level of chem usage, which had me craving Psycho. It meant that I was stuck on level 3 and unable to jump deeper. I was able to flicker one force field off and on very quickly, but it was so quick that it was unable to pass through. There was another way through, and in all honesty, I only knew about it due to previous playthroughs. Explosions. Leaving timed explosives at the force field base destroys the emitter. Sadly, I had to leave and trade for some as I left many of mine in the boneyard. This also allowed me to wear through the chem addictions and get that intelligence back up. Annoyingly, on the floor below is a case full of explosives that were just taunting me. Before we get there, there's a guard named Flip who tells us to go to the lieutenant, but attacks us if we refuse to do so. Killing him results in the only human we have seen, located in a prison cell nearby, crying out that we didn't have to kill him. Well, she's wrong, but Sarah was evidently in love with this mutant, and we can find a flower on his body. I give it to her in a trade and then give a fairly mean goodbye as no other option remains. While many of the mutants here come across as brutish, most of them are clearly more cognitively able than Harry and co were with the way they're able to organise and utilise the tech that they have at their command. It seems that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to these super mutants, but with their goal of attacking the wasteland, they must be stopped nonetheless. We see that this base level contains the vast vats of FEV, and all the pieces of the puzzle are slowly coming together. One piece we may not have expected though would be that the children of the Cathedral are deep in the recesses of this base. They all scream their innocence and that they only work here, just doing as they were told, with this parallel being very obvious. Amongst these cultists is the control computer for the base and the VAT system that you can hack into, but it's scrambled unless you decode it. Clicking on one of the system's codes without thinking can trigger a countdown. That can only mean one thing. The first time I do this ends up like this. Seems I died in the explosion. Reloading, I decided to explore more of the base first in order to gain some answers. I come across some strong mutants before finally meeting the lieutenant, sometimes spelt Lou-tenant, when talking to the less able mutants. This pun doesn't really work with the English pronunciation lieutenant though.
Well, I'm quite impressed. My spies told me you were resourceful, but they seem to have underestimated your talents. Guards, capture him.
He's an especially curious beast of a mutant. He has extraordinary clarity, sophisticated knowledge, and enhanced biometrics, the most notable being his prosthetic eye. If we're taken to him by submitting to capture by Harry or another super mutant, we will be able to have an intriguing discussion with him. Tony J, the voice actor, exquisitely brings this mix of mutant and machine to life.
It is so nice to see you.
If, however, you met him by blowing your way through the base, you are simply locked into a fight with him, which is rather sad in all honesty. He is easily the most difficult enemy that you will have come across. He hits hard and is hard to hit, but apart from that, there's really nothing remotely unique about this fight. Bringing enough resources and dealing enough damage is all you need to defeat this otherwise great character. That's not strictly true, as there are other ways to defeat Lou that are not just combat orientated, with the ability to get into the FEV console not dependent on meeting him, and you can even sneak by him, learn about the impending attack on Vault 13 and steal his locker contents dressed as a Cathedral cultist before getting out of there. But it's a slight disappointment that the actual fight with him is just a mutant with elevated stats, though Fallout does extend an olive branch of sorts for beating him with this horrifically violent animation. Exploring the console after with better stats allows us to properly decode the computer, and we'll be glad to. Firstly, we can see files and several interesting characters from around the wasteland, with only 2 being downloadable, and then we can decipher the security codes, all of which are self-destruct sequences, but the time to escape varies. We exit the base and we can rejoice that the source of the super mutants is destroyed, but there are many more questions to be answered. Most prominently, the super mutant leader has not been wiped off the end of the Earth. Though, I wonder if many people would have assumed that Lou was the leader if they hadn't had that brief interaction and hadn't fully explored what was going on. I guess he's called Lieutenant, a rank that is high but still defers to those above. Fortunately Luckily for us, the 2 data entries we recovered reveal a lot more. Firstly, we have the Maxon diary, Maxon being the name of the leader of the Brotherhood. The data entry is actually his granddad's, who was a US military captain at the time of the Great War. His unit found out about the experiments being carried out at Mariposa and began brutally interrogating the scientists, with revenge being one of the self-realised reasons. Maxon was told that the experiments were ordered by the government but didn't believe this at first. After a while, the truth is realised and he declares his unit in succession of the US, but there is no response, as soon the bombs fell. After a while, his troops set out to the Lost Hills bunker, thinking this place is likely to be targeted. I have, in all my time playing Fallout's many games, never really understood the Brotherhood of Steel, and felt that them hoarding technology and refusing to share with the Wasteland was never really justifiable. If their ideology was to be that of an isolationist faction, why are they so intent on interfering with so much? But this diary really answers that question, making it clear that the Brotherhood see themselves as a barrier between the evil of the pre-war world and the way that science was used against the people, elevating this faction in my eyes. The other log is equally as illuminating as it is the diary of Richard Gray. There are a few people that we come across in our time that have mentioned this name, but they are very few and far between. The only one who gave us any real information was that of Harold. Harold is a legend, he's beloved by the Fallout community, and his story is one that more should know. He can be found in the hub's Old Town, and is the source of tales both old and new. His appearance on the map is that of a ghoul, and his talking head is similar to Set's, just a bit more green. I'd call him a ghoul, but there's somewhat of a debate about this due to the way he changed into what he was. In the words of Chris Avalon, Harold is, well, Harold. If we chuck him a few caps, he will tell us what happened.
We mounted an expedition. God, Richard Gray led a small group of us up there. Richard Gray was a doctor, a little older than me, and Fran was he smart. He found the source, some sort of old military base. We lost a lot of folks getting in there. We got pretty far inside. Wasn't a lot of us left by then. Gray, me, and a couple of others. One of them robots got Francine. Mark was wounded, sent him back to the surface. Then, it was just me and Gray. We made it to some sort of central core, like a plant of some sort. That's when it happened. A robot crane crashed into us. Last I saw Gray, he was flying through the air and into some sort of acid bath. I was in bad shape and, well, I passed out.
But Harold's friend didn't only survive, he mutated and became something much more. His diary tells us of how he was able to change and absorb other life forms into himself, not only their physical form but their thoughts and other cognitive functions. He is even able to intertwine with a supercomputer, vastly increasing his knowledge. His predisposition towards philosophical thought and biology amongst this madness leads him to a belief that only way that peace can be brought about is through unity. Unity of purpose, unity of thought, and unity of being. Through the super mutants, he wants to fuel this goal, with them being the perfect vessels for this new world, with Gray learning that those with low exposure to radiation are prime candidates for mutation, with their minds expanding and not constricting like those of Harry. This explains why vaults like our own were high-value targets. There's a strong intellectual and ethical drive from Gray, but also the murmurs of a Lovecraftian hunger that wants to consume all, that makes Gray compelling even before meeting him. Disappointingly though, Harold cannot be informed about this discovery of his old friend.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
In this playthrough, it's fairly clear that Gray is at the Cathedral, as we saw the children at the military base, and our brief chats with the followers basically confirm this. Also, it's the only place we haven't been to if we're being a bit meta. The location is very gothic and it stands out amongst the rest of the game. There is plausibility that it survived the bombs, but the location strikes me more as a stylized final area that is more about making an impression than fitting into the post-apocalypse. Just look at this angel bust. It stands formidable amongst the wreckage, steeped in both its religious and horror connotations, something that its inhabitants only reinforce through their dogmatic belief in unity and the one they call the Master. Venturing inside, we can see a fully staffed clergy of sorts, and the whole environment is dense with tension. The symbolism is in full force, with screens replaying the messages of unity to the Congregation. The whole place is a tinderbox of tension, but there is no smoking gun unless we bring it. How to meet this Master and defeat him is a mystery that we have to choose our way to approach. It's as if a game master is saying, you arrive at the location, morbid and formidable, emerging from the ruins of LA. What do you do? Luckily, due to our excessive exploration, we acknowledge that there's an insider that can help us, and we find her.
Hello, my brother. May I be of service this glorious day? Follow me to a place where we can talk. It's not the inner sanctum you want to enter. I've followed Morpheus down a back secret staircase. The guy activates a secret door at the bottom. He uses this strange key to open it and disappears.
She may not know everything, but we know who and what we're looking for now. We can search upstairs for Morpheus, who should have the key to the Master's whereabouts. If you're not looking carefully or have bad eyesight like myself, you may easily miss that there is Nightkin in the halls above. They're using stealth boys, cloaking fields to conceal themselves, giving them an ethereal blue tinge, which would go on to be what separates Nightkin apart in the future series. We can talk to these mutants, and they appear to be very coherent, if standoffish. Morpheus, leader of the church, can be spoken to, though this can be quite difficult as any companion will make him hostile.
I don't remember inviting anyone to my room, and yet I have a visitor. Why?
Luckily for me, mine died, so everything was cushy. Even with high speech and charisma, trying to convince Morpheus that we're just another member of the Children is futile and will end up in a firefight with all the other Nightkin.
You must be eliminated.
There is another option, to use this knowledge of our vault as leverage to get him to take us to the Master. Having read the files, we are being rewarded for our knowledge, and we can meet Richard Grey, the Master, at last.
I will take you to the Master, but if you are lying, you will know.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
A voracious string of skin and sinew that stretches over the august overseer of death. Biological gore and technological horror combined with cables and spinal cords being interchangeable. An outstretched eye and what is left of his human face stretch over a screen. The Master is everything that it was rumoured to be. And its voice, and the delivery is harrowing with the way it interchanges and weaves through different aspects of this monster and the unity it has created. And we can ask it about its ideals by convincing it with our charisma.
The Unity will bring about the Master race.
Master!
One able to survive, or even
thrive
in the wasteland. As long as there are differences, we will
tear ourselves apart,
fighting each other. We need one race.
Race!
One goal.
Goal!
One people to move forward to our destiny. Of course.
Mutants are best equipped to deal with the world today.
Who else?
The ghouls?
Please.
Normals?
They brought nuclear death to us all. This will be the age of mutants.
Unity and peace is only achieved by succumbing to the power of the Master and absolution to its vision, a vision that doesn't allow for independent fall or refutation against one's ultimate place in the world. Just like the dogma of the Brotherhood, this ideology has been formed through the lens of nuclear destruction, that the struggle of man against itself caused the fall of the old world, and the new one must be united, not only in purpose but in being and race. There's an ounce of compelling truth in his reasoning, but there is obvious moral and practical problems. Then there's also the worry that the Master isn't as altruistic in its aims as it claims, with this unity coming more in the form of a rabid hunger as described in its diaries. Like many that confess a common cause, it could be merely a conqueror in disguise. On top of this, there is a clear parallels to Christianity that the Master brings that give its character a symbolic depth. It's a self-proclaimed God, but one that has a sense of power to connect the consciousness of others and to become a trinity in of itself, with its human and mutant and AI selves converging amongst others it's devoured. The dipping of people into FEB to become reborn is an opaque reference to baptism, and there is more besides. The questions and the twisted design of the Master make it truly unique as an antagonist, and I think it may be the best in any game for its depth of goal and how succinctly it epitomizes the full extent of everything Fallout tries to be. It is the antagonist born of the apocalypse. It dreams of a world that can undo the sins of men, but is truly just another horror created in their image. But how do we defeat it? Again, Fallout lets us decide. The obvious answer is to fight it and take this existential threat down by throwing hands. We may be able to destroy it and the cathedral behind its back like we did at Mariposa, and there is also a third option.
And what is that?
To discuss its plan further. We can tell it that there's an issue with its plan. It's not convinced, but that's because we haven't learned of the actual problem that makes its plan futile. But if we rewind a second, we can do so. 3 is the head scribe of the Brotherhood of Steel, the top of their research division, and if we are deemed smart enough to understand, we can convince her to give us a holodisc of the autopsy results she has made of recovered supermutants.
All the mutants I've studied have been sterile. They can't breed with another creature. If we could clean up the mutation sources, we should be able to simply outlive the mutants. Here, take this holodisc. It's got copies of my autopsies on mutant corpses. It clearly shows that no mutant could possibly reproduce successfully.
We then get the option to try and pass some high speech checks to present these findings to the Master.
Preposterous!
The FEV2 virus doesn't destroy the reproductive organs of those it mutates. Do you have
proof?
I must
digest this information. One moment.
I understand now. You made a clever forgery. You made this up to fool me.
Fool!
Me!
But it cannot be. This would mean that
all my work
has been for
nothing.
Everything that I've tried to
a failure!
It can't be. I don't think that I can
continue.
Continue?
To have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness.
Madness?
There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have
hope.
Whether the Master truly believed in the Unity, or if it was just a justification for its hunger is arguable, and I like to think it's a bit of both, but without that purpose and justification for its actions, the Master sees no future and decides to terminate itself, setting off a nuclear self-destruct sequence, allowing you, if you have explored and extracted the right information and have the right skills and stats, to defeat the Master with reason. There's still the matter of escaping the Cathedral in time from the heart of the supermutant power, with them fighting you on the way. The entrance to the Master is through an underground system and eventual vault, all of which has flesh bulging through it, showing that the Master has expanded and united with the building and was not merely the remains of what we saw above, but a monstrosity of grand power. When we escape, we are shown the Cathedral going out in a blaze of glory. We are left with the now troped ending slides that explain the outcomes of the people and places we have come across, and how our actions imposed on their future.
The death of the Master was the first major step towards ending his mad dream of conquest and enforced peace. But it is the destruction of the vats that neutralizes the mutant threat. Without the ability to create more mutants and enforce their harsh brand of justice, the mutant armies flee to the east, beyond the no man's land. The ghouls of Necropolis learn how to maintain the repaired water pump, and eventually rediscover many lost secrets of engineering. They form a business, selling this technology to other towns. The mutant armies, led into battle by the fierce supermutants, destroy the followers of the apocalypse. Barely human carrion feeders pick over the followers' remains. In Shady Sands, Tandy helps her father Aradesh bring a new community and new life out of the broken remains of the world. They are responsible for the new California Republic, whose ideals spread across the land. Killian Darkwater takes firm control of Junktown, drives out the last of Gizmo's kind, and then enforces his own brand of frontier justice. Life is fair and safe under his law. The Brotherhood of Steel helps the other human outposts drive the mutant armies away with minimal loss of life on both sides of the conflict. The advanced technology of the Brotherhood is slowly reintroduced into New California with little disruption or chaos. The Brotherhood wisely remains out of the power structure and becomes a major research and development house. The hub disperses before the might of the mutant army and will never recover. Thanks to your persistence, the Raiders are destroyed as an effective fighting force and disband. None of the Raider survivors are ever heard from again. Your involvement with the various places and people of the Wasteland is well documented by future historians. Only a single question remained unanswered. What happened to you?
You've done it. That's wonderful, amazing. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished, what you've endured. There's no way the people of the Vault can ever thank you enough for what you've done. You've saved all our lives. Who knows? Maybe even saved the human race. Yes. That makes the rest of this even harder. Everyone will want to talk to you. Every youngster will look up to you and want to emulate you. And then what? They'll want to leave. What happens to the Vault if we lose the best of a generation? What if we are the only safe place in the world? You just gave us back all these lives. I can't take the chance of losing them. I've made a lot of tough decisions since I took this position, but none of them harder than this one. You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
The haunting walk away and the ink spots signal the ending of Fallout. The Vault Dweller is no longer able to use that title as they are banished into a world of hardship shaped by their decisions. We decided very early on that we were going to do what we called a wide game design versus a deep game design. There's not a lot of content on any one pass through Fallout, it's a fairly short game, but every time you play it, if you make different decisions, you'll get radically different outcomes. Dependent upon your character and what stats you have, and your reputation, and all this good stuff, you'll get a very different outcome. This is just one story of the Vault Dweller though, and there is more to experience. We can experience new side quests, new solutions, new consequences, new end slides. But how deep is Fallout? Is there actually much more to this game as I've suggested? There are the obvious faction fights, such as Killian and Gizmo that we can side the other way on. The most apparent difference will come in the case of the ending slides, which explain the consequences of these choices. But while these do add a bit of meaning to the playthrough, they aren't the most impactful when we're actually playing. But there is more we can learn from characters if we engage more with them, and this does allow the location to feel more well realised and alive. By modern standards, this feels quite normal, but this was quite exceptional at the time. The biggest differences are actually more player-led. For example, with our knowledge of the game, we don't actually have to take the long route to our goals. The Mariposa military base is immediately west of Vault 13, and speedrunners have adapted builds to blow the Mariposa base immediately after seeing sunlight. If we do want to still roleplay as a character though, we can look to invest our points differently in different skills and stats in order to pursue a different playstyle. We can then use new ways to achieve the same goals, and Fallout does try to encourage this. We did have a process where we'd have a spreadsheet to track different quests and the way that they could be solved. We wanted to make sure we had 3 basic archetypes: Speech Boy, Stealth Boy, and Combat Boy. We can blast everyone we see and leave the Wasteland more worthy of its name. This may not seem to be a good idea, but no one is unkillable, and we can complete the game this way, and very few games have ever allowed this freedom, making certain characters invulnerable in most cases. Stealth is very much an option and something encouraged to try. There have been several times that having quick feet, swift hands, and a quick wit would be able to solve an issue. Apart from the obvious thievery, we can sneak by enemies such as Harry, steal key items, and use lockpicking and science skills to bypass certain fights and get to key locations. It isn't the easiest thing to do in Fallout, and I wish the combat clock worked with stealth better so it could be utilised for time actions and patrols, but it is possible. Having better charisma did allow the main playthrough to gain more information, dig deeper with people, but this kind of thing is only shown by other playthroughs when we realise other characters didn't have the same wide array of options. This is exaggerated when we have a 1 intelligence character, as you have very unique dialogue options to portray this lack of intelligence.
Well, if you say so. Now, run along because we have work to do.
Fallout certainly does allow you to roleplay as different versions of the Vault Dweller and dictate your own adventure by making choices in what you do and how you do it, often giving you opportunity and reward for doing so. But, and this is a big super mutant sized but, not all builds are equal. One of the best YouTube journalists about the classic Fallout is Warlocracy, and he deemed in one video that it's called Fallout 1 because there's only one build. Leaving my jealousy for his ability to create esoteric yet understandable and illuminating videos aside, he has a point. While you can play Fallout however you like, it is hardly balanced well. There are some stats and skills that are incredibly useful, constantly checked by the game and make investment in them feel worthwhile, while there are others that are hardly ever used, both in and out of combat, and feel mostly useless, even if you know the game in and out and are fishing for certain encounters. You could argue that this represents the Wasteland life. No matter your ability to gamble, swing a bat or barter, if you can't shoot a gun, you ain't gonna survive. No matter how lucky and drawable you are, if you don't have the ability to think and adapt, you won't get far. If you want to try and survive without these basics and roleplay as a bruising tank or as a frail scientist, then this is a challenge that will be reflected. Even Max Stone, the pre-built punching man mountain the game suggests as a character build, has 4 intelligence, suggesting it's a bad idea to go lower. I'm somewhat open to this idea that a lone wanderer character, as was the original intention, will find it easier if they fit into more of that gunslinging mold, but I do have some caveats on that opinion. Firstly, if this is the intention, then this isn't clearly enough told to the player. Yes, the world is painted as hostile from the very start, but it isn't clear to what degree we can establish help from others. I could set my character up to try and be a doctor of the wastes, before finding out that relying on others to be my shield really isn't that plausible. Secondly, if you do choose to have these more difficult types of character, you won't always get the payoff you deserve. If I really spec into the skill of survival, for example, I may not expect it to be useful in every scenario, but it should certainly be used more than it is to justify the skill existing at all. Lastly, melee especially seems to be a skill that is unintentionally underwhelming. It doesn't take long for the damage dealt by melee to become redundant, while also leaving you more at risk of being hit, with no downside to those shooting at you if you get close and personal.
Certainly, we have all the time in the world. Trust me.
To borrow from Warlocracy again, he has a theme through many videos asking what makes a Fallout game, what really sets it apart. Is it choice, personality, characters, reactivity? In my opinion, it's a bit of all of those, but for the first Fallout especially, if I had to use one word to sum it up, I would use realism. At first, this doesn't seem to suit a world in which we have towering monsters, brain-wielding robots, and even psychic powers, but everything in Fallout, no matter how ostentatious and wacky, is grounded and weaved seamlessly into a world you can imagine existing outside of your input. Everything and everyone seems to have a place, one that is being threatened by the Master, and everything it stands for. But even the Master is not a foreign entity, but one that is an evolved horror that this world has produced, one that it felt it had to produce. The real magic of Fallout, the thing that really makes it unique, is that this realism never takes away from that tone and themes that the game sets. The Master and Unity are just the epitome of this, but it is actually the concurrent merge of the real-world survival, of lone-wandering gunslinging, of grand philosophies leading to grand tragedies that make Fallout great. Instead of conflicting upon one another, these all work in unison and they elevate each other. All are experienced by the Vault Dweller in a way that they see fit. And this is why every Fallout game since, and many more besides, are trying to recreate the feeling of the first Fallout.
We will tear ourselves apart fighting each other.
There's plenty I wanted to talk about in this video, such as the use of psychic powers in the game, the legacy of Fallout and how it impacts on the story, but it felt it didn't really fit into the retrospective. I will try and cover that in a Q&A discussion video if there is interest. So please post your thoughts, critiques and questions below and I'll see if I can get back to them. I've included links to work I've quoted or credited and urge you to visit them. Apart from that, make sure to watch the ethics video because no one bloody has. Like and subscribe this video. It'd be really nice to do this more often and I can only do that if I have the right support. Apart from that, good night and God bless.